I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of Public Works, February 23rd meeting to order, and ask if anybody else besides LCAT is recording.
Shirley Tancredi for the minutes.
Okay, awesome. I'll accept the motion to review and approve the minutes of the meeting of February 2nd.
So moved.
I'd like to second that motion.
Any further discussion, changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? And we will welcome Greg Neffinger, our interim town administrator.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about Human Resource Department funding, I believe.
Right, so there's been a proposal in the past about trying to get a human resource department going in town. And of course, that means expending more money for the town for that position. But the way I've been talking to people is that, in fact, we probably spend that much money again on legal defense and other things from problems that arise from how to deal with problem employees, or even how someone may become a problem employer where they may be able to be kept as a good employee in different personalities and things of that nature. The laws are changing, and I was reading just recently from my decision that went against the community, because even though they had policies in place, they didn't have a systematic way of putting those policies into place or implementing those, and so essentially that was a suit by a former employee, and the community lost because they hadn't been doing that. So I think we feel like a human resource person would really be great for those type of things. And we've had various people with various success by hiring outside consultants to come in. I'm not sure what kind of interaction they had with DPW or with the school department. But we've come up with all kinds of different descriptions of human resource positions from other communities. I've spoken to the town of West Springfield, where I was very familiar with that position, and I know Sandy McFadden very well. And we discussed, how other interactions between the school department and human resource and the rest of the town. East Long Meadow is very similar to that, where there's a school committee, there's a school department, and then everything else works underneath that. If the new charter is adopted, pretty much I don't see from reading the charter any changes that would happen in the school department. But be it as it may, I spoke to Gordon Smith, and he sent back an email saying the school department supports the development of a town human resource department. It would be beneficial to have coordinated efforts on activities such as common trainings that all municipal employees need, or defining and implementing regulatory changes that take place year to year. Also, as the town of West Springfield, after I spoke to Gordon, I said I'd give Sandy McFadden a call and ask her, how do things work with the school department. So she says they definitely keep some of their own things, but all the benefits and everything, they come to the human resource to talk about retirement, health insurance, other things of that nature. And then he also adds, as we discussed on the phone, the school department and the school committee have specific responsibilities that may be unique to the school employees and should remain as a school department responsibilities. And he added things like policy manuals, which are really specific to Mass General laws and school personnel and things like that. They would like to keep things like that, and collective bargaining, and the responsibilities for hiring, evaluation, discipline, and dismissal, etc. So there's obviously things that they feel like are very unique to them that they feel that should be kept. Bob and I were discussing the possibility, and Bob did mention other things that were specific to DPW, especially like licensing and other things that really should be monitored here and kept here and things like that. I think that the big idea that, from talking to various people, is basically the idea of training and implementing various laws that are passed, and letting people know what those laws are also, especially department heads, to make sure they're aware of those various things. I tell people anecdotally, when I was mayor of West Springfield, the very first thing, the very first hour, the human resource person should have come up to me and said, Greg, we need to talk. You cannot do anything else until we talk. And that is, you come from the private sector, and now you're in the public municipal world, which is its own, world. And basically, your ideas or about how things are hired and fired and disciplined are not the same in the private world as they are in the municipal world. And you need to be aware of all the various things that could cause lawsuits and things of that nature. And that would have been a great discussion to have with that person, especially since I fired someone after being there for a month, But so essentially, those are very good discussions to have, because municipalities tend to be somewhat of a moving target. So, there are lawsuits that come for municipalities. I mean, Bob could probably tell you some stories, and I could tell you stories of, things that perhaps could have been done better, but even when they were done the best, even then, sometimes you can't win.
Yep.
But trying to make it better, I think, is helpful. So, I don't know if you have any questions or not. Again, it's very general. I think my intention is that it would be a work in progress, essentially. We would hope to hire somebody and then have them look at the whole town and give suggestions among the departments, and DPW being under the board of DPW and through Bob, and talking about how that would actually work, and the same thing would happen with the school department also. So.
Yep. I mean, I certainly have a couple questions and a couple comments. So, do you know how many employees the town has? I meant to look it up somewhere.
Yeah, you know what? I just printed it out, and
I guess. I mean, is it, I don't know. It's quite a few.
I think
right?
it's something like 500 employees or something, including teachers and everything.
Yeah, I
else.
think the teachers take a big chunk of that. I'm not sure if it's quite 500, but it's a
But
good
to
chunk.
tell you the truth, people ask me how many square foot is your house. I'm an architect, and it's like,
Yeah, so,
I never remember.
I mean, if it's over 400 or 500, from my perspective, I mean, to run any corporation or organization or municipality without a human resource person, so for me, I can't conceive having this large of a corporation, organization, or municipality without one. So that's just my personal opinion. But I think what might be important or different that we have to really understand is, in the private world, the president and/or senior leaders hire the human resource manager, and they pretty much tell them, this is the way I want to run the culture of my corporation or my organization. So that's pretty clean when you get your instruction from a CEO or a board of directors to the HR, and they describe the culture of an organization. But as a municipality, I think what we have to do is make sure, as we're considering who we're going to hire and what they're going to be responsible for, that we understand the flavor of a municipality. That being said, teachers, DPW workers, policemen, firemen, rec department, COA, there's just so many different miniature corporations, if I can use that analogy, within our municipality, that the human resource manager, director, is going to need to have input and be flexible between the different smaller corporations, if I can use that analogy. And given that we have union contracts of different colors, different sizes, different shapes, I think we have to leave a lot of discretion and interaction and communication to the individual police, fire, DPW, school, because we don't all operate similarly. We have the same common core to take care of the residents of East Long Meadow and do what we need to do to minimize taxes and give the best of education, parks, streets, schools to everybody. But the policies, the procedures, the how we handle grievances and situations can certainly be coached and probably be a great asset, so long as there's still latitude in who and why we hire what people and how we manage their day-to-day activities. I don't know if I said more than a mouthful there, but...
No, I think, and I really comprehended everything you had to say. From my observation in West Springfield, the human resource director would just be there as a resource. So even though the structure was different than East Long Meadow, where everyone was under the mayor, basically, if a department was going to hire someone, or if there was union negotiations, the human resource person was there with the department head, and pretty much the department head was known to be the person who was really, spearheading the ideas and the
Right.
concept.
So that, I totally agree with that concept, that they're there to help, they're there to guide, they're there to do some postings, maybe help us find some of the best candidates, maybe help write up job descriptions, maybe help, in those tougher negotiations where we're looking for input rather than go right to a lawyer. Maybe we actually go internal to the HR manager and say, hey, here's what we're working with, what do you think we can do within the town's parameters to kind of work both sides of this negotiation? And then only then do we go, to council. That would save us all some money and
Absolutely.
might expedite the process a little too. But I think there has to be that little bit of the individual personality or corporation to kind of work with HR, but still keep the culture of, because I'm sure the culture of the police department is just a little different than the culture of the fire department or the culture of DPW,
Absolutely.
or the culture even at some of the individual schools or rec. And if you try and combine one culture that is 500 employees or whatever it might be, I think we're going to have real tension as opposed to real good harmony of all of them working
Of
together.
course, yeah. You know how things work, is that people have been here longer, have a relationship with other folks. Selectmen tend to come and go, and selectmen, on my side, often come in with an agenda.
Right.
They ran on something, they were elected, but the human resource person hopefully will have gone through several selectmen,
Yeah.
can sit down with them and say, I understand what you're trying to do, and so you need to also understand a little bit about how the communities are run and things like that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the department heads, in my opinion, really should, if they're running their departments well, really should have authority over those departments. And again, the human resource should be there as a resource.
Yep.
I know myself, being a small businessman, I've never had the privilege of having an HR person, and we have to deal with all these compliance and regulations, which we really don't know enough about, and so I think it's a good idea. I think we need it, a person, just to make sure that we're complying and I know occasionally somebody will go to a seminar and learn something and come back, and we all have to sign a form or something that or go online and read something that says we've read it and sign it that way for discrimination suits and that sort of thing. So, again, you just got to make sure that we still have control over running our department and not having somebody telling you, who to hire and everything else, because we want to be able to go through the process of hiring the right people to fill the position that we're looking for, and,
Absolutely.
And
I think that's
Yeah.
part of the board's
right.
autonomy also, is that.
And in discipline, we need to be able to discipline them when they're, not, when there's an issue, so. And it'd be nice to have the human resource person there as a guidance person, just to help us through the process if we need it, to make sure that we're doing everything properly.
So I've read a few of those emails that have been bouncing back around, and I think it's gonna add a lot of value to the town, and we probably should have had it a lot sooner than this. I mean, I thought I read one email where it was an HR person and an assistant. Are we looking for 2 positions in that office?
Actually, right now, in the selectman's office, one of the gals does half-time with Corinne Trambisi.
Right.
So we're probably going to take that person, and also Nick Bro used to do some human resource things also. So we expect that probably one of the persons in the selectman office will go into a human resource department.
And then we would have to backfill those positions?
No. And then,
Well, who's gonna do those?
well, because she's already doing half-time there, so that would take away some human resource things that I do right now.
Okay.
And what she's doing part-time also will then go into that department, and Corinne would be in that department also, so it'd actually be 3 people in the human resource.
We really need the 2 people, huh?
Oh, he's talking 3 people.
Well, no, Corinne's, she's
Yeah.
more the benefits person
Right.
doing her thing, but it would fall under the HR.
Right.
But, you know,
right now-
to go from nothing to
Yeah.
2 people seems like an
Well, we have
awful.
1.5,
Right,
Right, so we got 1.5 is
Yeah.
what you're
to
saying.
go to 3.
So the HR director would be that professional person who comes in.
With all the
you know,
training and
the whole town,
specialties.
Right, would be in charge of, you know, communicating with all the departments with the training, like you said.
Right.
Things of that nature. Something that we're not doing right now, is something that even accounting is doing partially also. And I'm sure DPW is doing some, and school is doing some, so they would be taking on some of those roles. Yeah. So,
Under the direction of the selectmen, you would oversee the HR person as the
that's
administrator,
correct. Right.
you know, in today's scenario.
That's correct. As a matter of fact, I was speaking to the assistant town manager of Amherst. The town manager just passed away, but I saw him at the MMA, and he said that under his role, he was the human resource person. He was assistant town manager and / human resource, so, yeah. So somewhere in the selectman's office. And there's still some things I'm learning about, you know, how the bylaws of East Long Meadow work. And that the selectmen have certain responsibilities that I don't think are really being implemented well right now. One of them is that all the equipment and furniture in the town is supposed to be itemized by the town accountant and presented to the selectmen every year, and that's never been done. And so we're looking at things that really need to be done in the past, and all the equipment is supposed to have a label on it with a barcode and things like that, but, so just to protect the town from stuff walking away or whatever, or even know what our assets are, right? So there's other human resource things that aren't being done right now either, that we feel like the selectmen should be, because, what is the terminology? They're in charge of the defense of the town and other things like that. So to make sure that we're protecting the town, I think the human resource would be, you know, under the Board of Selectmen in that respect, making sure that all the laws for labor and things like that are being implemented.
So it'd be a department head sort of position?
Yes, it would be, yes.
Generally, I think it's a good idea. You know, I think I've shared the same comments that you had, the ability to maintain some autonomy within the department at the same time, where it's appropriate, create some standards, some consistency, things that need to be consistent across the town. Certainly, the HR director could help to make them consistent.
Any other comments?
No, I mean, it makes sense to me. I'm just trying to understand the structure.
Now, is this something that's going to be presented in the town meeting to fund this
That's correct.
position?
It's actually intended to be in the budget. So the Appropriations Committee, again, said they thought it was a good idea and it's long overdue, but they wanted to make sure that DPW and school was buying into the idea. Now, like you say about the structure, I think it's going to be something that's in the works. So we'll hire the HR person, and that person will then...
A professional in that
A
field.
professional, right, and who would look over the whole town and begin to come up with a structure. For
Draft policy.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I know Greg Moyer started a policies and procedures manual, but that was left incomplete, and, you know, various things like that would be handled. But it'd be a work in progress. She may find that her Corrine and a half-time person is planning for what she needs, so. Also, I think we need someone else for the Veteran Service Director to be reporting to. Right now, there's no systematic way, and we pay about half of his salary right now from the other of the 3 communities, I think, that share the Veteran Service Director with us, and yet that is another human resource service that we provide to veterans. And it would be nice to have someone that person could report to, and that would be Human Resource Director.
From a budget perspective, it goes under select person's budget, or will it end up being split, school, DPW, other
have its own budget.
for now.
That's right, and I think it would be similar to, right now, the selectmen have a budget, like Corrine is under the selectmen.
Right.
Now Corrine would be under human resource. A new health department used to be with animal control, and emergency management was underneath the selectmen, now it's under health department. So that is going to be a new department created for the budgetary reasons. And so same thing, accounting is separate and collector treasurer is separate.
Legal is its own entity too.
It is.
If we need legal, it's in the legal budget.
That's correct.
So it'll be the same idea.
Right. So the same thing, accounting is underneath the Board of Selectmen, but it has its own separate budget.
Okay.
But accounting does work for DPW,
Right.
it does work for the schools and things like that.
Right.
And also by law, by Massachusetts general law, it says that the accounting and auditor, which in our case is the same person, has certain responsibilities by Massachusetts general laws, so.
Okay.
Probably one thing, just as it came to mind, and Dan, you might be able to shed some light on this. The town used to have a personnel committee, which was a cross-department committee,
Personal policy.
Yeah.
personnel that
Right.
provided an opportunity for input from departments in
Right.
townwide personnel matters. And I would think that particularly during the development of this position, the development of the individual, that it'd be important to develop some type of committee that
That's a
would be the
great
vehicle
idea.
by which
Yep.
this HR
You
director.
were on that years ago?
Yeah, we had a personal policy committee that was made up of DPW, library, council on aging, school had its own.
Heads on.
Yeah, or they weren't part of it. And then, I think there was 5, and I think then there was like 2 or 3 appointments of just townspeople that were on it. And we basically looked at, to make sure that every department had all their people reviewed on a regular basis. There was the town hired Tuber Associates to be the consultant that we worked with, and they did all the work. We just were part of the process, and made sure that every department had, people were evaluated, make sure their job descriptions were up to date, because some of them were, until it was formed, they were way outdated, and some departments were getting evaluated every year, and others were waiting 3 and 4 years to be reevaluated, so we put together a schedule. And we just made sure that there was continuity between all the different departments, so if it was a clerk with a grade 7 in the DPW and the one in the town clerk's office, it was the same position, the same grade, they gave it numbers, they had scoring to give points to it, that the pays were the same, because we found that the same job people were doing, it was just this one person got a raise, this one didn't, and they just said, well, we're just going to call this a grade 8. Well, it was really a grade 7, but we wanted to give them money, so they decided to call it a grade 8. So this went through and made sure there was continuity between departments, because that was causing a lot of friction. And also, for department heads, we were the ones that determined, it was a recommendation, because we didn't have the power. But the Board of Selectmen had a representative, DPW had a representative, so that the selectmen really were the ones that went back and presented it to the board, and usually went along with what the decision of the Personal Policy Committee was. And they determined raises and pay scales for people coming in for contracts and where they should fall based on experience and that sort of thing. And so it was interesting, and 5 years ago or 6 years ago, they did away with that. And I think we got out of kilter again, because people just were getting raises arbitrarily, and some people were getting them and some people weren't. So I think it's a good idea that we...
That issue has already come up in this budget cycle in the town hall on the first floor, how certain people were asking for raises, and other people were saying, well, what happened to this salary study that was supposed to happen? And so maybe we'll wait till we do the salary study, then we'll look at, raises and
And we just handled the people that did not were not in a union, because we can't do anything about union negotiations. So there were a group of people that weren't in a union, and so we were the ones that would determine that what their pays were and what increases they got, and they had to, each department presented the people as far as what their reviews, because we did reviews with them and presented the reviews, and based on that, we made a recommendation as far as what we felt what grade they fell into, or in that case, we just said, we had meets expectation, exceeds expectation, superior. So you sort of said, all right, they fit into this category. Then we determined how much money, we were told how much money there was to be given out. And we said, all right, this will be a 1%, this will be 1.5%, this will be a 2% raise, and that's how it was determined back then. There were some flaws in it that need to be worked out, which we never had the time really to finish, but 90% of it was good. And that's probably true with anything. You can't be 100% on everything.
So I think the intention is that a human resource person would be available to implement those type of things, and hopefully organize a committee for personnel that could bring those things back. Because it's obvious that we'll need to have DPW input into, various policies and procedures that happen.
So do you guys want to do a formal vote so they can put it in the warrant? That it's a board decision, or
Yeah.
do you want to do it now, or?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good
I'll make a
idea.
motion that we accept the town's request or thoughts of hiring a full-time HR department. If you modify that anyway, or...
Second.
I'd like to second that motion.
Okay. Any further discussion?
It might be better presented as supporting the
Concept.
Board of Selectmen's proposal to create a HR department, because it's really being put forward by the Board of Selectmen, and Appropriations Committee wanted to know whether other boards supported it or not.
I amend my
Just like
motion.
that.
I amend my motion to what he said.
I second the amendment.
Anything else?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate all your help and input.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for your time to explain it.
Help you with your tasks at hand, let us know.
Right.
We're here to help.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Well, on to family gathering at Cal's, and then back here for appropriation.
There you go.
Oh, you got the same.
Tell them we said hi. All right,
Thanks again.
take care.
Okay.
Yeah.
Grab-
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you.
It's a good secret.
All right, so now we'll move right into superintendent's report. Bob?
Okay. Wanted to remind the board that we have a March 1st deadline for submitting town meeting articles. I don't believe we will have a lot this year, but I did want to mention a couple of items, some that are directly ours and some that are indirectly would likely impact the department. First is that, like we did last year, for the first time, there will be a separate article to fund the Water Enterprise Fund and to fund the Sewer Enterprise Fund. The wording for that article will be identical. The figures that go into that article will be different, obviously, than last year, and those figures aren't yet available because they depend not only on what's been put forward in front of appropriations for a department budget, the expense side of the equation, but we also have to then put forth the revenue side of the equation, which will depend on the development of rates for fiscal 17 and also getting some input from the town accountant. So she and I have talked about things. Our game plan is in March, when she gets back from maternity, very short maternity leave, get back from maternity leave, to really put the meat on the bone in terms of what those numbers should look like. At the same time, I'll be working on developing what I believe the rate structure for fiscal 17 would need to look like, and put that in front of the board so those numbers could be available and acted upon far enough in advance of town meeting. So what my plan is, if it's works for the board, is to put forward a draft article for the Water Enterprise Fund, a draft article for the Sewer Enterprise Fund, again, the language being identical to last year, and as a placeholder, and then again with the understanding that the numbers will be input at a later date. with both input from the board and the town accountant.
Works.
To water and sewer, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Two separate articles.
Right. It'll be the same way that we handled things last year, where
Right.
you present, you're basically submitting, both the anticipated revenue as well as the anticipated expenses, and the two have to balance each other out.
And we've been dealing with Springfield Sewer and Water, so we got an idea what those rates are gonna be?
Yeah, the good news is that some of our latest dealings really are more multiple years ahead as opposed to fiscal 17. So
Okay.
obviously, there's a need to anticipate in that and get prepared for that, but it doesn't necessarily impact fiscal 17. It may impact future fiscal years. The other item, which I'll put in as a placeholder, although we may not need it, is a Chapter 90 funding article. And the reason we may not need it is the way that we voted Chapter 90 funds last year. It was inadvertent, and I'll take the responsibility, the blame, or the credit for whichever way you decide to look at it. We essentially voted a year in advance with the way that the governor's office wrote letters last year. They wrote two separate letters with the same numbers in it. And when I added up those numbers, I came up with a number that was essentially double counting one of the fiscal appropriations. So we, in fact, at town meeting last year, voted contingent on receiving reimbursement, so we have spent those monies, obviously. But the vote has been taken essentially a year in advance of this year's Chapter 90 funding being available. Dan will talk a little bit more about what we expect Chapter 90 to look at, but our anticipated funding and what we voted last should be covered by what we voted last year. It's sort of a short story, but I took two letters that had the same number in it and counted it twice as opposed to just counting it once.
Okay.
But I'll put it in as a placeholder again. If for some reason the governor comes up like he did last year, it's unlikely with another $100 million, we'll still need to have a Chapter 90 article. But if he comes up with a typical amount of money, we likely will not. A couple of other items that the board will likely be impacted by, or at least should be aware of, is that I expect that there's going to be a citizen's petition to accept the last piece of Waterman Avenue, which is about 400 feet long, that connects, interestingly enough, an accepted piece of Waterman Ave, an accepted section of Birch Avenue, and it's the only way actually to get from Waterman to Birch to cross this unaccepted section of roadway.
I saw the map.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's probably something that should have been done 10 or 12 years ago when the road was paved, but for some reason it wasn't done, so it's really just an attempt to catch up with
Just
what...
cleaning up some bookwork.
Correct, correct.
So
And-
the resident will present the,
Yes, he has the
Yeah,
signatures all
okay,
ready to put
okay.
that forward as a citizen request, and he'll be submitting that before March 1st, and I would then expect, as typical, the Board of Public Works will be asked to then make a recommendation on that article. And then the last item that will somewhat impact the board is, we're in discussions, again, Dan will speak about this a little bit more, with a potential land swap adjacent to the landfill. There's a, I want to steal Dan's thunder, so I guess I won't say too much, but...
So we'll hear from him.
Yeah,
How's that?
Dan will take care of it. It's a placeholder. It would be an article that would not be put forward by the Board of Public Works because, again, it's related to the landfill and the legacy-related issues at the landfill.
So the selectmen will
So
bring
the
that
Board of
forward?
Selectmen would put that forward, but we are managing those activities on behalf of the board. And we, in fact, met with Mr. Neffinger this afternoon or this morning to get him up to speed on the issues.
So we'll wait with bated breath for you.
Absolutely. So the next item I had was staff news. I guess I invited Mr. Esposito into this meeting. He will be officially taking over as our new highway and utilities manager on March 1st, but I felt it was a good time to introduce him to the board, in case you didn't know Roy. I imagine that you probably do, because Roy's been a very patient man. It's been 43 years that he's been working with the department, so he's waited a long time to have this opportunity, and he was the right man for the job, so we had...
Official confirmation, congratulations.
Congratulations, Roy.
Roy will be stepping in, helping myself out tonight because Mr. Fenney is out sick, so Roy is going to be, in advance of formally taking over the position, serving in that role this evening relative to storm response and cleanup activities. So
I think Roy's plowed a couple streets.
Feet
I
to
think
the
so.
fire.
Just a couple.
And I did want to take an opportunity, Bruce is not here tonight, but thank Bruce for the support that he's given to me in the department over the last year, where he's had to fill in as the operations manager for a good part of the year, and has essentially done 2 jobs for some period of time. The way that we'll be organizing the department, and we've talked about this a little bit before, is that Roy will have responsibility for the highways and utilities, basically the linear assets that the town owns and manages, and Bruce will retain responsibilities for the buildings and for the facilities around the buildings, so the fields, the grounds. I think a secondary benefit of, well, a couple of benefits of one is that the users of those facilities, the superintendents, the principals, the council on aging will have a single point of contact. If there's an issue that they need to deal with at the facility, it won't be calling one person for something outside of the building and another person for something inside the building.
Standpoint, it's going to be a lot better.
It also, I think, particularly in the field area, it's really going to help to elevate the attention that we pay to the fields. As everybody knows, Bruce is, very detail-oriented. He's a very good guy. We give him a task, and he gets that task done. So I think he's an area that I want to spend a little bit more time and energy and effort on, and Bruce, I'm certain, will accomplish that. He will also retain the responsibility for the management of the garage and the garage foreman and the mechanics. We've made some good progress over the last year relative to our vehicle maintenance program, and we want to continue that progress going forward. So he will have that responsibility as well as the field responsibility as part of his building and facility manager position. Let's see, moving on, we have, as the board knows, we posted 2 positions with a deadline of the end of the day today to be filled internally, if there were internal candidates. The first would be a foreman position to refill the position that Roy held as the water department and water division foreman. And also then we looked at, and Roy can attest to, for a number of years, there's been a suggestion that we have a 4th equipment operator for a lot of reasons. One, we find ourselves, particularly when we're dealing with vacation time, holidays, things like that, that we find ourselves short equipment operators, and we really need more than we have. So we have an opportunity right now to add a 4th equipment operator position. We've had 4 applicants internally for 2 positions, so in the next couple of days, we'll be making a selection to fill those 2 positions. Then lastly, we do have 1 open skilled worker position, because as Roy steps up, there's then a hole filled behind him, and then a hole that's behind that person that fills his hole. We have received a couple of resumes from some interesting candidates. We have not interviewed anyone yet, but my hope is that when Bruce Fenney is back, hopefully from sick leave, and Roy's on board, we'll then start the interview process and give both Roy and Bruce an opportunity to meet these potential candidates. As Mr. Mayberry knows, I'm moving on to another topic. He and I met with representatives from the Springfield Water and Sewer Commission last week to discuss our draft contract. I think we made progress on some issues. There are still some other issues that we'll probably talk about in more detail that we haven't made as much progress as I think we should at this point. And the big reason to focus attention on the contract is the contract serves the basis of cost apportionment for what Springfield is anticipating to be about $75 million worth of capital improvements over the next 5 to 10 years. We obviously should be paying or need to pay for our fair share of those improvements. It's just a question of how that fair share of the improvements gets defined. The next item I had was just kind of an advance notice regarding the likely timing of a water and sewer rate hearing. As I mentioned before, in order to build our article for the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund, we will have to establish rates for fiscal 17 going forward. If we follow the same schedule we did last year, we would have the rate hearing probably our first meeting in April, which would mean that I would want to have draft rate information to you to be reviewing a couple of weeks in advance of that rate hearing. So that's what my game plan is at this point. And as I mentioned before, although there definitely will be some long-term impacts coming from some of the capital improvements that Springfield Water and Sewer Commission need to make. They won't necessarily impact us this next year, but they will be coming.
Like in 18?
18, 19, yeah. Another item, Mr. Mayberry and myself met with the Appropriations Committee and Capital Committee last week. It was a joint meeting between representatives of the school board, the DPW, and it was going to be the Board of Selectmen, but the chairman of the Board of Selectmen couldn't make it to the meeting. Thought it was a productive meeting because really the focus, what we had on was recognizing that the town has a lot of capital improvement needs, and we were asked to try to put our heads together and see if we could come up with any sort of a common approach or common understanding of what those needs were and a common approach for addressing those needs. And what we did was we put a fair amount of time taking a look at the debt service that the town would be retiring over the next 5 or 10 or 15 years, and take a look at the opportunities that that retired debt service would provide to reinvest in capital through new borrowing that would replace the existing borrowing. By doing that, you would be able to expand the capital improvements you can make without having a direct impact on the tax rate, because you're basically taking money off the tax rate and you'd be using that to fund up new capital improvements to keep the town's facilities going. I expect we'll have another meeting, I think right now is scheduled for March 8th, providing them with some updated numbers that generally I think it was received fairly well. You know, we may not get everywhere to we would hope to be, but I think we'll definitely make some progress in terms of being able to take another look at the capital improvement list and getting further into the list than the capital committee might have originally thought we could.
So it was just a representative from one from appropriation?
Oh,
the whole board?
team,
Oh,
yeah.
oh, okay, good. Good.
Right. You know, I think they're originally a little bit skeptical because they didn't know what we would be presenting, but I think as we
Right.
got further into it, they understood it.
They understood it?
Yeah, they had some questions, we had to update some numbers, and I think what we'll be able to come back to them will be pretty solid to demonstrate, again, the ability for the town to absorb or pay for new capital projects is greater than they may have anticipated.
It made a lot of sense when you showed us the graph.
Sarah's on board too, right?
Yes, she is, yeah. Yep. I'll tell you what, since we've used a fair amount of time already, I'll wait until Bruce is back to get into the details of some of the things that we've done over the past several weeks. I did want to make a note that we're very fortunate we made it through that short but very cold spell with only one freeze-up problem in town buildings, and that was actually in a small room at the high school that we had a hydronic water heater or heating unit fail, which then caused a water line in that room to freeze up. Didn't create any damage. We had no damage to the building or anything like that, but as a result of that, we had a burst pipe. The room, because it's only used right now for storage, we could actually eliminate that piping altogether from that room. So we're reducing the heating load and removing the potential for any future freeze-ups in that location. But we made it through in every other town building with no problems at all during the cold weather.
Better than some of us.
We did have, quite a few customers that had to deal with, because we saw temperatures that many people hadn't seen for quite some time, in some cases had never seen, with the piping and the systems that they had in place. A new item, the building department, or building inspector, electrical inspector, school department, and representatives of the Board of Selectmen and DPW are meeting with the town's energy contracting consultant, a gentleman named John Alba, who we've worked with on a number of different energy efficiency projects over the years. Apparently, National Grid has a new project, a new funding program for funding LED replacements in public schools. John is going to present what that program is all about, what that criteria might be. The little bit I heard about it today indicated that would likely be a fairly short-term payback criteria, that 2 years or less of payback. So it would be some of the immediate types of things that you would want to do. It might not necessarily fund everything you might want to do, but it's really to learn more about that program on Monday. And then I believe John would likely go out and take a look at all the town school facilities and try to identify opportunities within those buildings to benefit from that program.
So if they put some LED lighting in the high school, that would help with the load?
It definitely
High
would,
school,
yeah. Yeah, the payback may be there for some of the lighting systems, it may not be for some of the other lighting systems, because we not too long ago replaced a number of the fluorescent lights with the T8 categories, which are about, the most energy efficient fluorescent light that you can get,
Right.
not as energy efficient as LEDs. So the payback on something like that is going to be longer because the investment's already been made on the newer light. But some of the older lights, most likely the payback will be much shorter. So-
But the bigger problem was over there that they don't have enough load coming to
Correct.
the building, right?
Right, and that's a definite secondary benefit, is if LEDs will drop the energy consumption by, to 25% or less of what it currently is, so it would free up some capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, we even replaced T8s at our place. T5s, T8s, we replaced it all. Because it's just so much
Right.
less load.
Right.
We're in the process of doing it now.
And they last for 10 years. 5 minimum, 10 probably. I mean, we changed light bulbs, just the cost of changing light bulbs. I bet you if you factor in the cost of our staff changing light bulbs.
Right.
Lights are out, lights are out, lights are out every
Right.
day, I bet you.
Yeah.
So,
Yep, so that, we'll be digging into that starting on Monday and see where that leads us.
and those are soft costs you don't think about, but if a guy has to go out and change some light bulbs, he's there half a day or all day. Could have been doing
Right.
something else.
Right. And I think that was the last item I had.
All right.
Good, just quick items, just an update on the roads, we're gearing up, we should have the roads project ready to bid in the next couple of weeks. Basically, as Bob said, we're expecting to get just our regular allotment on Chapter 90 money. We expect a smaller project than we did last year, probably around a $600,000 road project for this year. The other things we're doing with the spring and fall crack sealing, and then we have that final section of Chestnut Street between Holly Drive and Benton that we deferred last year to let the trench area settle. The streets we're looking at for this year are Porter from Allen Street to the city of Springfield, Markham Road, looking to reclaim that whole street, and then portions of Allen Street. There are other areas we may look at, but those are the three main ones we're looking at for this year.
One thing that's worth mentioning on Chapter 90 money, the Governor Baker, when he came on board last year, moved that money very, very quickly last year. Unfortunately, they're back to the regular cycle, so the Chapter 90 funds for fiscal 17 have not yet been, 16, 17, have not yet been approved. We may be in a situation where we put a road reconstruction, a road paving project out to bid in anticipation of receiving money, because those monies may not actually be in place
Right.
until the State House gets their budget together, and that could be as late as January 1st or later. So we want to be ready for the funds as soon as they're made available to
January
us.
1st or
Excuse me,
July?
July 1st.
July
July
1st.
1st. Whereas last year at this time, the funds were already
Yeah, they had
available.
already had them all
Yeah.
last year, yeah.
The second thing is the as part of the II program, we're looking at continuing investigations in two areas in town that we haven't looked at before. And we're looking at a metering program, probably, I think, up to eight meters in place. 8 to 10 weeks, we're hoping that we get a nice rainy spring, so we get groundwater levels that are conducive to a good program. And if that's the case, hopefully we'll move on to flow isolation once we get to go through all the data to really.
Who hopes for a wet spring? You're a sick man.
People who meet
Dan,
so-
Dan, you're a sick man.
So, but we've got rain coming, so hopefully, jumping up, this could be in as early as the beginning of next week, or early as next week, hopefully. So, we'll see if we get good, if we get good rainfall, we'll see how the
It
sewers.
was the situation last spring where we had a very dry spring, so it made
Yeah.
no sense to spend money on metering
yeah.
when you wouldn't find any leakage during a wet year. You've got a better chance of
I
finding it.
understand.
I know.
I couldn't help myself. The devil made me do it.
Yeah, no, understood. So the third item is on the landfill. Basically, we've when the test pits were originally done as part of the assessment, you've heard some of this, but there's a small piece of land that an adjacent landowner owns that has some landfill waste underneath it. We reached out to the landowner, I guess in the summer, and we've been talking to them about basically a land, potentially figuring out a way to do a land swap or something to have the town accept ownership of that small piece of land in exchange for a piece of land at the back of the site, which is adjacent to his. Kind of makes, it's nice because the land swap would make a nice contiguous landfill parcel and would basically give him a small piece that's probably more value to him and take away the landfill waste from his property. So we're meeting again this week. Hopefully we're going to reach a conclusion, and if we do, it would be an article through the select board to do this land swap. So hopefully, if we can get it done for the spring, we will. If not, we'll have to wait for the fall. But that's continuing to move forward, and we're hopeful it'll get done.
This process started with a prior landowner probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, and for various reasons, those discussions stopped. And then with a new landowner, it took some period of time to get him up to speed.
It's that sharp triangular.
Yeah,
little
yeah, the point of the
piece that sticks
triangles,
right into
right.
How did that ever happen?
Who knows?
No idea, yeah.
And then the fourth thing I have is the bundled NOI we did submit, and we're going to meet with the Conservation Commission tomorrow night to go over it. It looks very good. We get positive feedback from DEP. They said it looked fine. They liked the way we broke it out. So we're looking forward to having that, all of our maintenance and replacement, all of those things spelled out for the process for each of the different types of things that we do in the DPW.
That should be very helpful, huh?
Yeah, the trickiest one is if we have flowing water. Everything else, it's pretty spelled out. If we had somewhere we wanted to do something where there was flowing water or perennial water, we'd have to meet with them. It's a little more of a process, but it'll be good to have it all spelled out.
And we'll be stepping them through the process tomorrow night. There's actually quite a few things that are completely exempt from Conservation Commission jurisdiction. In fact, any maintenance activities on water or sewer lines.
Yep.
Under the Wetlands Protection Act, they don't even have any jurisdiction over.
Pipe replacement, as long as it's the same size,
Right.
effectively, that's another
For water and
exception.
sewer, not stormwater, which is
Right.
kind of some of the idiosyncrasies of the regulations, that certain types of utilities are exempt, other types of utilities aren't exempt. And then there are other, as the way the bundled notice of intent is written, there are some activities that will be approved, we hope, under the notice of intent where there's no prior notification required, and then there's some other activities where we'll have to provide prior notification by contacting the chairman of the Conservation Commission to make them aware of it, but we won't have to go through a formal filing. And then there'll be some higher level activities that may require a filing.
And then others, we'll just have on-site meetings
Right.
ahead of the work to meet with them.
So for what it's worth, I have utmost confidence in management and employees, but to start off on the right foot and to really establish that we can do it the way they want us to do it, I would just highly recommend that we over-communicate. We're over-cautious with our work. We're, within the guidelines of what they would expect us to do, and we don't have anybody just going out there and doing anything helter-skelter, because
Right.
this has been a long time in coming, so we certainly want to preserve it forever.
Yes.
So the way we do that is to show how good we can act within what we've been granted. And it goes all the way down to whoever's running the shovels and whoever's putting up the fence to prevent erosion or whatever else we
Yep.
should be normally doing, or signs on the street that says under,
Sure.
whatever of
Permit. Yeah.
permit or whatever. Just
Right.
let's do everything at 110%.
By
But
letter, yep.
congratulations, this is a big step for us. This is huge.
Dan and I have talked about getting the foremen together and doing a training program, basically, so they all understand what you can and can't do. Taking it down to the level of providing photographs. Okay, here's an example of a type of activity
Anything would be
that
so
fits in
fun.
here. Here's an example of an activity that is not approved, that would require individual
And let
notification.
Concom know you're doing that.
Yeah.
I think that would be huge.
Yep. Awesome.
Good. And then the last one, just want to mention, we met with Columbia Gas, Bob, Roy and I, and I think it's very, very good meeting. And I've seen over time that they've gotten a lot better and much more willing and reaching out to the towns to tell them what we're doing, improving communication operations, new construction, down to pretty low level of details, which has been really good. I think this was probably the best meeting I've been to with them. They brought in really good staff, good, strong people, and we went through basically everything that we're doing, everything, how we communicate, everything they're looking to do, and I thought it was a good meeting, so.
Excellent.
Is that the Shaker Road project, or this is a new project going forward?
This is just kind of our
Okay.
spring, typically every spring we'll have a meeting with them and go through,
How did that go on Shaker Road? Was that?
well, I think it went pretty well.
Okay.
It was a difficult project for them. as you
No,
know.
yeah,
It
no,
took
I know, it
them
was difficult, I just,
2 weeks to get the work done.
oh, yeah, the weather didn't
Yeah.
cooperate at all, and,
Yeah.
yeah.
We discussed final restoration, and we all agreed that, come springtime, there was likely going to be a need to repave that section of roadway, clean up the right-of-way. There was work on a Bay State property, for instance, so they understand that when the time allows them to come in and completely restore, they will completely restore the area.
Okay, that's it.
Well, you've got some things?
No, I'm just excited to start my new position.
All right.
I have a lot of ideas. Bob and I have been talking. It's going to be good.
We agree. Awesome.
Great.
Okay. So I would like to set our next meeting, I believe. So that we do that in open session. And I have a suggestion that it's on March 8th at 5 o'clock. We would just need to be out of here by 6:24 and a half to get down to COA for appropriations.
Okay,
Does that work?
I wanted to move them to Mondays or Wednesdays. I mean, but if we got an appropriation meeting that day, then we probably should just keep it.
So we'll do this one and then make a note that we're gonna try and move to Mondays or Wednesdays.
And I can't do Monday, so we'll have to go to
So I
Wednesday.
guess we're going to Wednesday.
All right, March 8th,
Prince
at
Spaghetti Day.
March 8th at 5 o'clock
Works for me.
at the service.
Will it work one more time?
Yeah, make it work, yeah.
So March 8th, 5 o'clock will be our next meeting, and I'll entertain a motion
Motion
with
to go
respect
into
to
executive
potential
session.
litigation,
Okay,
and we won't be coming back.
and not to reconvene.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Roll call.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. so
Mr.
Tom-
Wilson, aye.
Mr. Bjork, aye.
Mr. Mayberry, aye. Thank you very much.